We got to talk about how does a low-cost strategy scale to other product lines? The folks at AceMagic sent this over for me to test drive and share some thoughts. This is the AX16 Pro laptop. I'll throw out some specs on one side of the screen here, but broadly, 16-inch laptop with a 1080p display running an AMD 5700U, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and 512 gigs of storage. I've been a huge fan of this new era of mini PCs from companies like AceMagic. There's a great strategy at play here. You take an older laptop chip, but you put it in a small desktop enclosure. You can deliver an incredible price to performance for consumers. These little PCs are super versatile and can be regular computers. They can be clients, file servers, game consoles, and emulators. These things are a lot of fun. But a laptop is a different kind of challenge. Now, some of the same philosophy still works, but there are also some concerns for this strategy. The AX16 Pro is a nice, sleek, portable desktop. It's the kind of computer that's at its strongest when you set it up, and you know it's going to kind of live in that same spot for a little while. It's not a tablet-y, thin and light kind of system. I'm happy to see a broad collection of ports, full-sized USB-A on both sides, full-size HDMI, memory card, and a headphone jack. There is a USB-C, and that is a little bit of a bummer. There's actually two, but one is only for charging. The other fully supports accessories and displays. So this can go triple monitor if you want to hook up extra screens. The keyboard is nice and broad, well laid out. There aren't any frills here like light sensors to activate the keyboard backlighting, but there is a two-stage switch for your key lights. A nice broad touchpad, though again, I'm sure this isn't going to win any awards for best touchpad on a laptop, nor is there any kind of biometric security. The audio is a bit mixed. The speakers are dim, a bit dull, and kinda hollow sounding. Like I fire up a film like Amadeus, and that orchestral score is kinda muted. Surprisingly, the headphone jack is nicer than I was expecting it. Nowhere near audiophile, but with some nice earbuds, decently low noise. And we're avoiding that cheap hiss that can pop up like on some of my lap docks. The amp is weak, but it should power consumer-y earbuds and consumer cans decently well. And I like the screen. It's a matte finish LCD. It's only 60 hertz. It's a little smeary on fast action. It's not gonna blow you away if you're used to more expensive laptops, gaming laptops, or if you've moved over to an OLED. But pulling it up, it's in that zone where it's competing really well against portable monitors. I know some folks will be picky about the resolution and aspect ratio. It's a 16-inch screen, but 1080p and 16:9. You can kind of see in the frame and the bezels, this is a generic hardware shell that is probably used by a couple different companies, and you might be able to swap out plates, swap out screens between 16:9 and 16:10, depending on the manufacturer requests. And where the overall build does not impress, the shell is a bit plasticky and flexy. I mean, just pulling it out of the box. The sides had that creaky sound as the panels were kind of rubbing against each other. The tray bends under the keyboard when you're applying a lot of pressure. I mean, the keys have a plasticky chunk to them, which actually helps them stay a little bit quieter, but typing, I've been spoiled by the keys on nicer Chromebooks. But what we can't fault is the performance. This little AMD chip is still a champ, even for being a U-series processor. It's a snappy option and is capable of a surprisingly high degree of compute work. Running some basic tests like my little video editing benchmark, it's not gonna set any records, and it chugs quite a bit when you're scrubbing a 4K video timeline, but I can edit videos on this. And the rendering speeds are better than I was expecting. Ditto a little gaming, where we have just enough GPU oomph to play some graphics heavy titles if you go in and disable some settings and tweak your FSR options. Of course, it should also be mentioned, we get a bit of a nudge in performance when we connect it to the charger, but running on battery Thankfully, performance doesn't just fall off a cliff. I'm sure some of us have had those experiences with other Windows laptops where you unplug the power and then you only get a fraction of that total compute power. On a 5700U, we're not seeing that kind of power disparity. And the fans are surprisingly well behaved. This little U series just sips juice at idle, and it seems to get more work done per watt of power than, the last Intel system I tested that was, we're kind of in that 11th gen to 12th gen transition. So doing something like streaming video, the machine is near silent. Gaming, the fans are making some noise, but you don't have that constant fan presence like we've had on other systems in the past. And for some compromises and concerns about support, it is a fantastically easy system to pop open and upgrade. 11 standard screws, and there's everything in front of you. Battery, and fan, and RAM, and storage, and even the wireless card. It's one of my favorite parts of a mini PC. They're easy to open and upgrade, and that charm is maintained here. It's one of the benefits of using a somewhat generic frame. So here's where I'm stuck, and where I would actually like some input from the audience. In my phone reviews, I hold to a strict category based on MSRP. That's how I rank a phone and place it opposite what I think is a fair competitor. If the manufacturer says, we think our phone is worth $1,000, then I think it's fair to compare it against other phones that start at that same MSRP, and then you can play some fun games with like trade-in deals and sales. But MSRP kind of doesn't mean anything in mini PC land. AceMagic says the MSRP of this laptop is $900. I gotta say, I think I would be disappointed to spend $900 on this and get a good screen and a creaky case and mediocre speakers. But the system seems to be on nearly continuous sales, and at $500-ish, it's a more competitive offering. You've got to shop around a little more to beat it, and you might be looking at refurbs with older chips or slightly more expensive laptops with newer chips, but it's slotted in a bit better. It fights really well against newer Chromebook Plus options, as an example. They run less powerful internals. So how should we quantify this? In a review where the second I publish this video, it's likely that the pricing across the market is going to fluctuate. Please drop some comments down below. How do we better position these things for the realistic expectations consumers should have when shopping a system like this? Because I am charmed by this overall strategy, but I think the sell in older chip brands fight much better in the desktop PC space. If you make an inexpensive frame for a desktop, the user is rarely going to handle that computer. You're not regularly reminded this was a cost-conscious device. You can pair a mini desktop to nicer accessories, nicer monitors, nicer speakers, and your experience can punch even higher above the computer's practical cost. It's a lot harder to hide those cost savings on a laptop. When you're looking at the built-in screen and you're sliding it out of a bag, you'll feel that much more consistently. You're reminded of the cost a lot more often. It's not all doom and gloom, because you could also hook the laptop up to other accessories, and the costs here are really close. If you compare AceMagic's 5700U desktop, you won't save enough money buying that to also buy a nice monitor and good speakers. And this laptop is a laptop. You can also run it on battery power. In general, I wouldn't recommend this computer for a busy on-the-go student or a business traveler living out of an overhead suitcase and a backpack. I really do mean it when I say this is a bit more of a portable desktop. If it lives in a student's bedroom or a dorm room, if it's the family PC and it lives at a little office desk and it occasionally moves around, but it's not constantly on the move, I think you've got a good fit. Now, as we're wrapping this video up, we have to address the big, ugly elephant in the room. This laptop was sent to me, and on scanning it, a virus popped up. I've never experienced this before with this brand or any of the other mini PC makers that I've reviewed, but it seems to be an issue folks have been encountering lately with this company. I'm really happy that I keep reviewer accounts of like my Microsoft login I use for setting up reviewed devices, but now I'm even more anxious about how I test these machines or try to use them in ways that might resemble more general consumer use. It also exacerbates my frustrations with Microsoft forcing accounts paired with machines at setup time, but I'll have to cover that in a separate video. When something like this happens, it chips away at the confidence of this market. It erodes some of the fun of why these machines have been so interesting to tinker with. And it chills one of the recommendations we've been making in these videos and reviews. Someone who wants an inexpensive desktop, it's all pre-built and you don't even need to worry about installing Windows. But that doesn't work if a consumer might encounter malware and they're not savvy enough to deal with that situation right out of the box. I reached out to the folks at AceMagic and they passed along a reply and some recent press releases on the situation. I have that official response linked below in the video description, which includes their plans to support customers and refunding people who might be affected. Their assessment of the malware wasn't exactly what I encountered, so I feel there may still be some other QA issues being dealt with in their supply chain and some older product that was affected that's still out in sales channels, but we can see the company is changing how it handles OS installation. As a geek, as a reviewer on my side, it's encouraged me to also get some better accessories for pulling drives out of systems and scanning them. It's also reinforced my review process for testing and also air gapping a system before I really put it into action. I'm not saying this is a perk and I'm not trying to excuse the situation, but it was also a learning opportunity. I learned how to do things like dump drivers in Windows 11 so I could install my own fresh copy of Windows and not have to hunt down drivers from a manufacturer. Another issue where I think AceMagic could improve their support, because that's ultimately what I opted for on the AX16 Pro. AceMagic sent over a fresh image to install, but instead I scrubbed out all the partitions and made my own Windows boot media with Rufus, then manually installed the missing hardware drivers from the previous AceMagic image. This has to divide my review into two broad audience chunks. If what I just said is too techie for you or the intended user of the machine, and no judgment, because quite a bit of this stuff is, those are things that I needed to learn on the fly while I was diagnosing some of this. I have a harder time recommending a cheap mini PC now. I can't expect large chunks of consumers to be able to run that kind of tech support, to even know if they have a problem. We can find some great deals on hardware, but not if they require some forensic OS management before you can deploy them. Now, if you're a little techier and you can tinker, then I still think there's a good deal to be found here, especially if you're not afraid of a clean OS installation, or if you want to fire up one of your favorite Linux distros. I will still be reviewing AceMagic products in the future with a lot more scrutiny on their software and security, if only to continue following whether they live up to their support promises and to hopefully spread the word if they let folks down again. I find it at least a little encouraging that the company didn't just change their name, just scrap the AceMagic label to avoid the controversy and come back as a different brand. So I don't know how to tie all of this up and put a nice pretty bow on it for you to cap this video. I was really disappointed to find malware on a system being sold. After scrubbing it out and installing fresh, it's been a decent laptop to tool around with. I've been digging it. I've had to do similar stuff like that in the past on name brand systems to get rid of things like Norton or other OEM pre-installed software, but that's a tangible difference over actual malware being found. However, we might want to joke about Norton antivirus. I'd definitely be interested in hearing your thoughts down in my comments. If there's a redemption story here, if this impacts your opinion of this company or of other companies with similar business models, and if you've had any conversations with your family and friends about these kinds of products or just their own sort of computer security in general. It'd be nice to share some of those thoughts and help us work out how to handle these kinds of situations as a community. Like I said, this video was significantly delayed as I really didn't know how to tell this story or address this issue with the manufacturer and with folks watching my reviews. I'll really appreciate the chatter, the conversation on this one, just what to do in the future. So, As always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing these videos, these reviews, and all of the support lately has been absolutely stunning. Those of you clicking on links in my video descriptions, hitting my home site, SomeGadgetGuy.com, or maybe you're joining the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon. That's patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. This list is basically the coolest collection of tech pals in the universe. So I hope you'll check them out. They're really good people. So, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet, at SomeGadgetGuy, basically everywhere. But these days, my safe space, my calm, and my fun geek hangout has been on sites like Mastodon or sharing photos on Flickr, going old school. A little less so these days on the Facebooks and the Instagrams, and definitely not on the Twitters. And I will catch you all on the next review.